definition of economic planning as given by Planning Commission. Now, Planning Commission here, you have to understand the Planning Commission is a government body to formulate plans with the Prime Minister as its chairperson and also having a vice chairperson and a CEO. Now, Planning Commission was set up back in 1950s when economic planning was initiated in India, and it is also worth mentioning at this point that P.C. Mahalanobis was a main contributor in the early years of planning by also giving the second five-year plan model. Hence, he is called the architect of Indian planning. So this is a short introduction as to the history of Planning Commission and what does the Planning Commission do. The Planning Commission formulates plans for the development of the economy. Now, the definition given by Planning Commission here is that economic planning means utilization of country's resources into development activities in accordance with national priorities. So the definition is self-explanatory, although we need to understand specific characteristics of this planning process. So we are going ahead to the next paragraph where the definition itself will be explained a little bit elaborately. So the next paragraph states, economic planning refers to a system under which a central planning authority, that is the Planning Commission in India, sets specific targets and specifies a set of programs and policies to achieve these targets within a specified time period. Now let us understand this point through an example. Let us say a specific target, let us take, is reduction in unemployment in the economy. For this target to be achieved, the government will undertake and execute certain programs and policies like government schemes for employment generation both in rural and urban areas. You have heard the Manrega scheme, which is there in rural areas for generating employment opportunities in rural areas. And in urban areas also there are many government schemes which help in providing employment to rural youth, to the educated jobless. Also, the government can go for providing through its programs and policies low interest loans for opening up own businesses. So in this way, the government tries to achieve its target of reduction in unemployment and also in a specified time period. So I hope this point is clear and understood. Now, before going to the next point, there is a note here that Planning Commission is now replaced by Niti Aayog, which is put there in the box for you to see. Planning Commission is now replaced by Niti Aayog in February 2015, which aims to achieve sustainable development goals through involvement of state governments using a bottom-up approach, which means that it involves the state governments in the policy making process. So this is called bottom-up approach, unlike the earlier Planning Commission till 2014, which followed a top-to-bottom approach, where the central government or the Planning Commission itself decided upon the plans. And also this Niti Aayog follows a 15-year roadmap with a 7-year vision, strategy and action plan, unlike the previous Planning Commission which followed a 5-year planning process. So far, by understanding that you have got the points, I am moving forward to the next point in this topic. Planning process also has other essential features to it, like planning focuses on a rational management of scarce resources for maximum social advantage and maximum welfare of people. Now here, the very point that says resources are scarce, you can see a micro and macroeconomics link here, where microeconomics talks about the very fundamental issue that resources are scarce, that is unlimited wants are faced with limited resources, and hence these limited resources require rational use for minimum wastage and maximum welfare of the people. This is what talks about maximum social advantage in the use of resources. So moving on to the next point, their objectives of planning are predetermined. Now it is a common understanding with all of you that plans have predetermined objectives. It is the same in the case of economic planning of an economy, where objectives are predetermined, and there are two categories of objectives: long period and short period objectives or goals. Long-term goals are common to each 5-year plan. An example also I have put there: eradication of poverty is a long run target. It cannot be achieved in a short duration, hence it is a long-term goal and it is common to each 5-year plan. But short-term goals are plan specific, as each 5-year plan has its own set of specific goals which depends on the prevailing economic conditions in the economy. Now let us suppose in a particular 5-year plan, if the inflation rate is very high, so the government will see to it that there are policies and programs formulated and initiated to bring down the inflation rate. Like it happened likewise in the earlier plans, 5-year plans. The first 5-year plan focused on development of agriculture. The second 5-year plan focused on massive industrial development, which was given by P.C. Mahalanobis. That was his main emphasis for heavy industrialization in the second 5-year plan. And so I had mentioned the point of P.C. Mahalanobis being the architect of planning, and you should make a note of it because it will also help you in answering any objective question like what is the contribution of P.C. Mahalanobis, why he is called architect of planning. Okay, so going ahead to the next topic. So I hope till so far you have understood the points that have been discussed. The next point here is each plan has a definite time period. So that is a clear point that, as we say, India adopted 5-year plans. So 5-year plans itself is for a duration of a 5 year, and so it is a time-bound plan. This concept was borrowed from the Soviet Union, which is now Russia. So this whole topic here, which we discussed, is about economic planning, its meaning, its process, and the essential features of it. So moving ahead, going to the next topic, which you need to understand also in detail, though briefly, need for planning in India. Now, the need for planning in India arises due to the very first reason that India inherited a backward and stagnant economy from the Britishers. All sectors were underdeveloped and GDP growth was very low. The very point that backward and stagnant here means that the growth rate was negligible. GDP was not growing. As the sectors were impoverished and backward, there was underdevelopment. So initially at the beginning of discussing this chapter, that's why I went to a quick recap of chapter 1 so that you can relate these points to chapter 1 and understand why it then became necessary for the new leadership, the new Indian government right after independence, to take up planning as a process to uplift the Indian economic condition. So India needed a big push of investment supported by the government. So I'm just following the points that are put there in the presentation. So the very first point, that India was backward, and hence planning was the only way that India could come out of its backwardness. Hence also it could not be left to the private entrepreneurs or private businesses to uplift the condition of the economy, as it was not possible at that moment in which Indian economy was. that private sector could invest in such huge proportions to uplift the Indian economy. Hence, the government solely could do it by a big push of investment in all the sectors. So, going ahead to the next point, establishment of economic and social justice as per the directive principle of the Constitution. Now, the point here is establishment of economic and social justice, which is also a guiding principle in the Constitution and is also a national long run goal of a democratic system. So, to understand the point, what is economic and social justice, you need to understand 3 points here. I will be going a little slowly now. So, uplifting of weaker and backward sections. In order to attain economic and social justice, it is important that these three areas are taken care of: uplifting of weaker and backward sections. Secondly, reduction of personal and regional disparities. Personal across sections of people, regional across states and regions. And thirdly, preventing concentration of economic power in few hands. Few hands here are few people or families, business families or corporates. So it is to ensure that a larger portion of wealth and income does not go to few hands but is equitably distributed in the Indian economy. So establishment of economic and social justice has these three areas wherein the economy has to be uplifted. So this can only be done by the direct intervention of government through planning. Hence, there was an urgent need of planning in the economy. The third point, use of resources in national interest. As planning facilitates increase in output according to national priorities. So, it is only through planning that the output can be increased, also keeping in view the national priorities. So, when it says here that using resources for national interest, it includes 2 points: efficient and optimal use of national resources. Efficient and optimal, that is without wastage and fulfilling maximum needs, catering to maximum uh, social advantage of the society. And also, secondly, investing resources in areas which are crucial for economic development. Investing resources in areas which are crucial for economic development. This point can be understood by a very simple example. Let us say that using resources for building schools, colleges, and institutions, that is, investing resources in building a sound, good education system in the economy, means using resources for national interest, because development of education system will further help in development, faster development of the economy. So this point with this example, I hope it is clearly understandable to you that using resources for national interests, which can only be done by the government through its economic planning process, and private sector cannot ascertain that resources are used for national interest, because private sector is motivated by its own profit motive rather than welfare motive. So the last point that we are coming to here in this topic, need for planning, is creation of a well-developed economic and social infrastructure. Now by infrastructure, the word most of you are aware of it, that infrastructure is a support system for the economy which is required on a day-to-day basis for the smooth running of the economy, and hence infrastructure is both economic and social. Economic means power, transport, communication, banking, and such facilities that support the economic system and its sectors. And social is education, health, and sanitation facilities. So all together, this infrastructure setup helps in the development of an economy, and the infrastructure can be developed by government through government initiatives, through government investments. The private sector is not willing or reluctant to build infrastructure in the economy because of huge investment. That is one major reason why private sector is not willing to invest in infrastructure. So it is only by the government that this area can be taken care of. So far we have seen meaning of economic planning and need for economic planning in India. I hope you have followed all the points. So let us come to the end of this presentation. I'm leaving you with two questions. Of course, the first question is already answered for you. Define a plan. A plan is a document of detailed scheme, program and strategy worked in advance to fulfill an objective or objectives. And the second question that I want you to write down in your notebooks is, why did India opt for planning? This very question can be answered with the help of this points in this topic, and also from whatever you have understood in the first chapter, which will help you to write the answer to the question, why did India opt for planning? So please write down the answer. And here I would like to ask you to rewind and go through the entire video once again, or repetitively take down the topics systematically in your notebook with the points that are stated in each topic. Today we have done two topics in this presentation. So do it and write the answer to the second question here. And by the time I join you with the next presentation, bye bye.